A very useful technique in glass blowing, whether it's scientific glass blowing or artistic, is making a cold seal. Now, a hot seal is where I take two pieces of glass and weld them together. They become one. But a cold seal is where I tack them together, where they appear to be one piece of glass, but they're actually not perfectly fused. And this can be incredibly useful if you want to use a piece of glass to hold your object, but then remove it later on. So the first thing is you want both ends to be heated up. Typically one end will be, say a marble or some other piece of work that you're using. And when you touch them together, you do not want them to be molten. So right now I've heated up the ends of these two pieces of glass, yellow and colorless. The ends are molten, so I'm going to bring the yellow out for a moment, let it cool down, and then I'm going to do the same with the colorless, and I give them a few seconds, and now I touch them together. Okay. My stick, when I touched them together, it wasn't perfectly centered, but that won't make any difference as far as the cold seal. It will make a difference if I was trying to use this as a punty, as a handle. So that is my cold seal. Now, how do I know it's a cold seal? Well, I take it and I gently tap it on a piece of metal, and it comes apart just like that. With soft glass, what I've found is that you do have to wait a little bit longer, typically, before touching them together to make a proper cold seal than borosilicate. I'm used to using borosilicate, so in many cases, when I'm making a cold seal with soft glass, I'll touch it together too quickly, and I'll inadvertently make a hot seal. So I'm going to go ahead and do this again, but this time I'm going to make my cold seal, and I'm going to let it sit for a while before breaking it. So give it a moment and touch. There we go. And I'm rotating the glass now to bring everything on center, because the colorless glass is molten enough, or was molten enough, that it would move. So I could bring it on center. And I can't stress how important this is, both as a method to manipulate the glass and as a lesson for making a bad weld. When I was first starting off with scientific glass blowing, I would fuse two pieces of glass together, but really what I was doing in most of the cases was making a cold seal. So whatever I was making would hold together for a while, but then if I would strike it, it would just break for one reason or another. And it's because I didn't have the two pieces of glass fully fused together. So I'm going to take this and set it aside very carefully and let it cool down, and we can take a look at it later. Now, what obviously we can compare to a cold seal is a hot seal, and a hot seal is a proper weld. So now I've got two pieces of glass. In this case, the yellow is longer than the colorless, but that's not going to make any difference in the final outcome, because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up both pieces of glass, and I'm going to get them really hot. Basically, I want the ends to become molten, and when I touch them together, I'm going to do so in the flame. If you noticed, I don't think I mentioned it explicitly, when I connected the two pieces of glass for the cold seal, I came out of the flame, let the glass cool down, then fused it together. So now I've got these two pieces of glass, the ends, they're nice and hot. Going to let them get a little bit hotter because I really want this to be a good hot seal. And now I touch them together in the flame, and I'm also going to rotate, and notice I'm staying in the flame. Okay, I move back and forth to help even this out a little bit, but I'm staying in the flame. This allows the glass to flow together. And now I'm actually gently pushing, so I'm actually making like a gather. I can come out of the flame, and I'm rotating and I'm gently pulling to help make this a little bit more uniform. It's not perfectly uniform at my weld, but I'll take it. Okay. Now at this point again, I keep rotating because if I let go of it, it will bend. So that's pretty good. Okay. Right here, it's a little thicker than I might like. In other words, it's not perfect, but I'll take it. I could go back in and heat this up and make this a little bit more uniform. But that's something that you can practice and have your students practice, of making hot seals versus cold seals and trying to get them as uniform as possible. Now I'm going to let this cool down, and I'll put it side by side with my cold seal. And again, in both cases, I have colorless glass and I have yellow glass, and that's to help show the interface. One of the reasons I chose to buy colored glass in borosilicate was so I could demonstrate to my students something like this, a weld, where you can see one color versus the other and how they're fused together. So that's another reason why doing some of the artistic type of glass blowing where you're working with color will actually be a really good method to teach the fundamental techniques. I have the two pieces of glass that have been welded together. Here we have a hot seal, and here we have a cold seal. And I've got the two pieces suspended over these test tube racks. And what I'm going to do is see about breaking the cold seal. Now the hot seal, I'll lift this up. I gently tap it with a metal rod, and it does not break. Now let's see. There it goes. Yep. So that sharp little tap gave me a break right there. And again, if eventually I will break this rod if I keep doing this, but it won't break necessarily here because it's a hot seal versus a cold seal. Now, one of the things about a cold seal, I actually first tried to break it using this scupula, and it wasn't very effective because of how light this is. You do need usually a metal object that's relatively got some heft behind it to properly snap these. But not all cold seals are identical. In other words, some cold seals will break when you don't want them to because they're very, very weak. Other cold seals, you'll actually have to give it a good whack to break it, and you might actually take a big chunk of glass off here. Right here, there is a sharp edge of glass, so if I was going to use either one of these, I would need to fire polish them before. So a cold seal is an excellent technique to know because it will come in very useful at times where you might not even think about how am I going to, not be able to think about how am I supposed to hold this without making it worse? Well, you can just bring in a cold seal, do what you need to, and then remove the cold seal. So again, it's the kind of thing that if you don't have that tool in your toolbox, it will make manipulating glass much more difficult. So it's a very good technique to practice and have students practice because you really have to get that touch of when is the glass at the right temperature and then putting them together, and then of course breaking the cold seal without breaking everything else.